You're listening to the Caramel Apples Podcast. You ready for this week's Orchard Trek Retro? I'm Kennedy Rizzo.
And I'm Cooper Lee.
And this week we have quite the treat for you. We're going to engage in a fascinating discussion about the ever-popular, ever-nostalgic weekly radio broadcast countdown show, American Top 40. Yes, and its iconic host, Hollywood legend Casey Kasem. Are you ready? Commence countdown. Now on with the countdown. Casey Kasem is one of the most influential personas in the realm of radio and pop culture. He is one of Hollywood's best-known voice actors with a signature style that's easily detected. He's also one of the most beloved, well-known personas in the world. Yeah, he has a massive number of commercially successful and critically acclaimed credits to his name as either host, voice actor, or producer since launching and hosting the nostalgic weekly radio broadcast countdown show, that of America Top 40. Yeah, this started in 1970, and we'll get into some of the semantics of that. But having an iconic voice and a set of vocal cords, Casey Kasem pleased the audience through radio and voice. He said of the recognizable quality of his voice, and I quote, "It's a natural quality of huskiness in the mid-range of my voice that I call garbage." It's not a clear-toned announcer's voice. It's more like the voice of the guy next door, end quote.
Casey Kasem. He had such an iconic voice of, the American radio.
He did.
It's completely recognizable.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and he essentially was one of the most well-known voices in recent retro history. He graced many a radio airwave or 10 back in the rockin' 80s. For over 3 decades, he hosted American Top 40, which aired the top songs of the week.
That's right. But before we get into the fascinating logistics of our favorite weekly countdown show, let's briefly outline some of the personal life details of our legendary radio host, shall we?
Oh, yes. Sounds good.
Okay. So, Casey Kasem was born Kamal Amin Kasem on April 27, 1932, in Detroit, Michigan. Larger than life, Casey Kasem was Lebanese American. Actually, he's of Druze Lebanese descent, who stood an impressive 5'6" tall.
Fun fact. Did you know that Casey Kasem's parents did not allow their children to speak Arabic and insisted they assimilate into American life?
That's a very interesting fun fact there, Coop. I think a lot of immigrant parents did that in that era.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. But as we've already hinted at, he was an American disc jockey, voice actor, and radio personality who created and hosted several radio countdown programs, such as the much adored 80s retro staple, American Top 40.
This is true. He was a most famous voice actor for numerous projects back in the day. So this fun fact is no doubt something that is completely well known, but bears to be repeated. Fun fact. Casey Kasem's most infamous iconic voice talents was notably lent to, and probably his most famous voice acting work for Shaggy. Zoinks! In the Scooby-Doo franchise.
Zoinks!
Zoinks is right, kidding. And Mr. Kasem graciously lent his brilliant voice talent for Dick Grayson's Robin, Batman's trusty sidekick in Super Friends.
Oh.
So from 1973 to 1985, Casey Kasem voiced Robin for several Super Friends franchise shows.
Oh, yeah. I can actually hear his voice in my mind's eye right now. It's funny when you stop and think for a minute, which you can remember.
I know.
Very cool.
Very, very cool. And that's why his voice is such an integral part of our fun, pop culture memories.
I agree. And Casey Kasem's voice was the key to his career. It was at the end of the 1960s he began working as a voice actor. Now, notably in 1969, he started one of his most famous roles, as you just mentioned, the voice of Shaggy on Scooby Doo, Where Are You?
And also along the lines of his valuable contributions over the years to animated characters, he lent his voice to. Here's yet another one you, dear listeners, may remember well. Fun fact: Casey Kasem voiced several Transformers characters, that being Blue Streak, Cliff Jumper, and Teletran 1, and Dr. Arkville. He left Transformers during the third season because he believed the show contained offensive caricatures of Arabs in Arab countries.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he states, and I quote, "A few years ago, I was doing one of the voices in the TV cartoon Transformers. One week, the script featured an evil character named Abdul, King of Karbam Bay? Bye?
I think it's Carbamia.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay. Okay. Carbamia. He was like all the other cartoon Arabs. I asked the director, are there any good Arabs in this script for balance? We looked. There was one other, but he was no different than Abdul. So I told the show's director that, in good conscience, I couldn't be a part of that show." End quote.
Well, um, it looks like Mr. Kasem wasn't in the mood to take any mess off of anyone when it came to his heritage.
Apparently not.
Yeah, no poking fun or demeaning allowed. I can't say that we can blame him on that, though. I mean, that's pretty direct.
Yeah, truly, truly. And it looked like he was quite dedicated and had passion about a few other things in his life as well,
Mhm.
but especially in lieu of his Lebanese heritage. He wrote a brochure published by the Arab Americans Institute entitled Arab Americans Making a Difference. He called for a fairer depiction of heroes and villains on behalf of all cultures in Disney's 1994 sequel of Aladdin, called The Return of Jafar. In 1996, he was honored as Man of the Year by the American Druze Society, mentioned earlier.
Very interesting, Coop. And get this, there is more.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like, oh no. But Casey Kasem was also a dedicated vegan, and he supported animal rights and environmental causes. And he was also a critic of factory farming.
Hmm.
So he initially quit voicing Shaggy in the mid to late 90s when asked to voice Shaggy in a Burger King commercial, but returned in 2002 after negotiating to have Shaggy become a vegetarian once again. Oh, so you see, Mr. Kasem was very serious. Very, very serious. Casey didn't play.
Certainly, yes, it looks that way. But if you're gonna stand for something, you don't want to be vacillating, right? It's like if you take a
Yeah,
stand once, you don't want to be like, well, now today it's okay.
that's right.
So I mean, he stuck true to his thoughts, so
Yes.
that's good. But even though he bravely stood his ground on a number of issues and topics of interest, Casey Kasem did make time to enjoy his family. During that bustling time, like most in the 70s and 80s, Casey Kasem was married to Linda Myers from 1972 to 79, and they had three children, and that would be Mike, Julie, and Carrie Kasem. After they divorced in 1979, a year later, Casey Kasem met and married actress Jean Thompson in 1980. They
Okay.
had one child, and that is Liberty Jean Kasem.
Okay. And not to be a spoiler, but there are some more interesting things in history surrounding his family which no doubt disheartened him and some of his closest family members because it is rumored that Mr. Kasem liked to keep a low profile and wished that he and his family's privacy be respected, even though that he was the most beloved public figure. So, yeah, there's some interesting details we'll be sharing here in a little bit about his family.
Oh my goodness, Kennedy. Can't wait to spill the deets.
There's totally tons of deets.
So behind the scenes so often bring us riveting details that would surprise the average public, no?
Much agreed.
Okay. Now let's get to the sweet caramel drizzle of this week's Orchard Trek Retro.
Ooh, let's do it.
So on July 4th, 1970, Casey Kasem, along with Tom Rounds and Ron Jacobs, launched the weekly radio program American Top 40, Progressive Rock. Loosely based on the TV program Your Hit Parade, the show counted down from number 40 to number 1 based on the Billboard Hot 100 weekly chart. Kasem mixed in biological information and trivia about the artist, as well as flashbacks and long distance dedication segments in which he reads letters from listeners wishing to dedicate songs to distant loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
Frequently, he mentioned a trivia fact about an unnamed singer before a commercial break, and then provided the name of the singer after returning from the break. Casey Kasem infamously ended the program with his signature sign off: keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
Yeah, I remember that.
So cool.
Yeah, America Top 40 debuted on 7 stations, but soon went nationwide. In October 1978, the show expanded from 3 hours to four. Hosted by Casey Kasem himself, he later remarked, I knew the formula worked. I knew people tuned in to find out what the number one record was, end quote. So, because of his great knowledge of music, Casey Kasem became known for his contemporaries on music history that he interspersed with trivia about the artists.
And being the host of the nationally syndicated Top 40 Countdown show, effortlessly drew we the fans in with his warm, sweet sounding, mellifluous voice and, velvet like delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Known as the notorious perfectionist in the studio, disc jockey Casey Kasem crafted the foundation for one of the most powerfully popular nostalgic programs to ever air on national radio, American Top 40. Other creative execs he collaborated with, we mentioned moments ago, were Don Bustany and Ron Jacobs, who too helped in the founding of American Top 40.
Yes. His brilliant format of weekly being at the helm of, counting down the most popular songs, along with the inclusion of fun facts, which Coop likes that one, huh?
Yes.
And where he read a handful of letters each week from listeners making requests for long distance dedications, which we just said we remember well. It just simply enamored a most devoted audience of listeners who found the combination of his voice, the fun way he presented the latest and greatest hits, and those letters read from rapt fans writing in their long distance requests.
So I totally remember as he read some of those letters, a lot of them were inspirational and upbeat, but let's be honest, some were downright tearjerkers.
I knew you were going to say that. They were.
Jeez, like have your tissue box handy already.
Yes, darn you, Kasem. But Casey Kasem saw a lot of shifts and changes to the musical styles over the decades, and the musical landscape changed so much during that time that in how listeners could buy, get access to, and consume their favorite tracks, which of course ushered in contractual issues and eventually declining in numbers.
And what you just described, Kenneth, is neat because we saw and noticed those same changes in the musical landscape, from a fan and consumer perspective.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And those were such wonderful times concerning cool throwback music. And unfortunately, it's crazy different now due to the drastic seismic shift of how we, enjoy our cherished music.
I know, it's just simply awful.
It is. It's just different. Fun fact, did you know that Casey Kasem was host of American Top 40 for, get this, 39 years?
That's a long time.
Yeah, that would have been so cool if it held out just one more year to make it an even 40 for Top 40.
Yeah,
39 is close enough, though, and it's awesome, so we'll take it.
I guess we have to, right?
Yeah.
Those types of numbers and stats just don't happen by accident, though.
Hmm.
The success of American Top 40 is almost single handedly due to Casey Kasem's dedication to the show's success and being the driving force behind its staying power all those years. So it's a testament to the unparalleled accomplishment by a true media legend in the rich realm of entertainment. American Top 40 continues to be the most relevant source for pop music hits currently and to this day. There's no better time to be had than when, thanks to technology, one can dive into and experience classic retro 70s and 80s hits along with Casey Kasem while listening to classic American Top 40. So, talk about a warm trip of sheer nostalgia.
Yeah, that's like hitting the nail on the head, right?
Yeah.
OMG. We hardcore music fans get to mentally and emotionally travel back to our recent past and enjoy our favorite tracks that never gets old, all brilliantly paired with one of the most iconic voices in pop culture, as well as radio history.
Yep.
The original chart topper offerings that were, archived for this blissful retro delight came from the 1970 through 1989 timeframe.
Yes, and it's real quick, Coop. I remember, like we're sitting here, we have our podcast, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
we have talked about this here and there before, but we used to use our dad's clunky tape recorder and tape this,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and then we would talk in between it, like it was like this was years ago,
Yeah.
and it was our imaginations, and it felt great because we felt like we were him, like we were. I don't know. We were impressed with what he was doing for real,
Yeah.
and we were imitating that, and we loved that. Like that would have been the coolest and most perfect job ever.
Yeah. And we always had a thing for music. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And here we are. We're talking about him, the man that got this all going, and uh, like his endeavors launched a whole area of like what podcasters do.
It's crazy.
So thank you, Casey, because now the Caramel Apples podcast exists because of you. Anyway, um, co-creator Casey Kasem hosted the original American Top 40 from its inauguration on July 4th, 1970, as we stated before, clear until August 6th, 1988. So Shadow Stevens took over the program on August 13th, 1988, and hosted until January 28th, 1995, when the original program came to an end. Do you remember Shadow Stevens?
I do remember Shadow Stevens.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll get to him in a second. He didn't do too bad, but but Casey Kasem would say this at the beginning of the inaugural AT40 broadcast, and I quote, "Here we go with the top 40 hits of the nation this week on American Top 40, the best selling and most played songs from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from Canada to Mexico. This is Casey Kasem in Hollywood, and in the next 3 hours, we'll count down the 40 most popular hits in the United States this week, hot off the record charts of Billboard magazine for the week ending July 11th, 1970. In this hour at number 32 in the countdown, a song that's been a hit 4 different times in 19 years. And we're just one tune away from the singer with the $10,000 gold hubcaps on his car. Now, on with the countdown," end quote.
Goodness, that's so nostalgic. Because you're reading it, I can hear him saying that, right?
That's what you'd have to do because that sucks.
No, you did a good job.
Thanks.
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really is nostalgic.
It is.
And the show began as a 3-hour program written and directed by Bustany, counting down the top 40 songs on Billboard's Hot 100 singles chart. The show quickly gained popularity once it was commissioned and expanded to a 4-hour program on October 7th of 78 to reflect the increasing average length of singles on Billboard's Hot 100 chart.
Hmm.
By the early 1980s, the show could be heard on 520 stations in the US. And at its zenith, the show was broadcast on 1,000 plus stations in some 50 countries.
Hmm. Well,
Mhm.
Casey Kasem told the New York Times in 1990, I accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative.
Mm,
That is the timeless thing.
yeah.
When he was hosting American Top 40, Casey Kasem would often include trivia facts about songs he played and artists whose work he showcased. Frequently, he would mention a trivia fact about an unnamed singer before a commercial break, then provide the name of the singer after returning from the break. So, you want to know more about Casey Kasem and America Top 40? He was known for the phrase, details coming up, which he often said just before the commercial break.
Yeah. So there were around 14 different segments that made up memorable, entertaining parts of American Top 40. Fun fact, those 14 segments were as follows: we have bios and stories, number jingles, chart trivia, long distance dedication, top three recaps, number ones on other Billboard charts. At 7, we have predicting next week's number one song. 8, great radio stations. 9, special reports. 10, whatever happened to. 11, oldies. 12, commercial bumpers. 13, bumper music. And last but not least, 14, the infamous sign off. Woo! Did you get all that?
Ah, my pen's still working.
Nice. So, which of those can you remember that really made an impression or that stood out to you?
Well, let me see here. I always enjoyed the number jingles and commercial bumpers.
Ah,
Those are so nostalgic, and they really define the show. They made the weekly countdown fun, I think.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
How about you, Coop?
Well, you've already mentioned the numbers jingles and the commercial bumpers and bumper music. So, a couple of the other segments that I really enjoyed were like the bios and stories
Okay.
and great radio stations, because, of course, you want to give a shout out to those who are playing you, right? I mean,
Of course. Oh, totally.
they're why you're on the air. And, of course, there's the long distance dedications. Who could forget
Oh,
those?
I know. I think that's probably the segment that stands out the most for most people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh my God, so memorable. So concerning the number jingles occasionally, a song was preceded by a brief audio clip of a group of singers announcing the song's position on the chart. Now this is so nostalgic. So they'd be like, number 40.
Yes.
This was especially common for the first song played in each hour of the show, and often for the first song after a commercial break. But was usually not done for the number one song. That was usually introduced with a drum roll,
Uh-huh.
or for songs preceded by a story. So the number jingles were updated and re recorded from time to time, and by the mid 1980s, the show began using two sets of number jingles. Yeah, so then they had the standard set to be used with up tempo songs, and then a softer alternate set, which usually was accompanied the low key or romantic songs.
Ah.
Yeah, the commercial bumpers were similar in format.
Yeah, and the great radio station segments were done once an hour, generally halfway into the hour. Casey Kasem relayed 3 or 4 radio stations that carried American Top 40. Beginning each list with American Top 40 is heard in the 50 states and around the world every week on great radio stations like.
I love that.
Yeah. So, fun fact, in the first few years of the program, Casey said coast to coast instead of in the 50 states.
That's right. Okay.
So the long distance dedications are probably the most familiar, as we had mentioned,
Yeah.
but the bios and stories segments were quite intriguing. And most segments of the show included 2 countdown songs. The second song in the segment would usually be introduced by Casey Kasem with a brief story connected with the song, which could be about its performer, its composer, or a random bit of trivia.
Yeah, yeah.
And Casey Kasem would often lead into the commercial break preceding the segment with a brief preview of the story, sometimes even giving away the song title or artist.
Yeah, he was known for the phrase, details coming up, which he often just said before the commercial break.
Yes. And some of the features of the Kasem era shows during Kasem's run as host, the American Top 40 show had a number of popular and distinguished features.
Yeah, American Top 40 hosted by Casey Kasem really was the bee's knees.
Mhm.
Although the show's format implied an average of 10 countdown songs per hour, once the show had gone to a 4 hour format, this was not rigidly enforced. However, by the mid 80s, it had become increasingly rare for the final hour of the show to have any more than the top 11 or any fewer than the top 9 songs left to play. Yeah, so the song's runs time determined how many would comfortably fit into each hour.
Mhm.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show. The show bent to fit the Billboard rankings, and some songs had to be edited, in addition to whatever edits had been done for the single release, with a verse or chorus cut, usually for songs on their way out of the countdown. And this was in order to fit this into the show.
Mm.
But Casey Kasem and his producers never lost sight of the stations carrying their show, and that's the stories behind the songs were the chief reason that listeners tuned into American Top 40.
Yeah. So in 1988, Casey Kasem left the show over contract concerns with ABC and signed with Westwood One to host a competing weekly countdown.
Mm.
Industry trade paper Billboard magazine reported that the main disputes between Casey Kasem and Watermark ABC were over his salary, which,
Oh.
yeah, it really does get to be a touchy subject.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, which Westwood One tripled upon his signing, because of declining ratings and a smaller group of stations airing the show. Casey's final American Top 40 show aired on August 6th of 1988. Fun fact, this show for Casey Kasem marked the, get this, 940th show in the series.
Oh, that's a lot of shows.
Yeah.
Well, we're not surprised, are we? It was faithfully all those years flowing on the airwaves on Sunday evenings.
Oh, facts. And at no point during the final show did Casey Kasem ever let on that any changes were afoot. However, he closed the show by telling the audience to catch him on the television show American Top 10 and did not plug the following week's American Top 40. Yeah, so since December 19th, 1987, he had always plugged both during his sign offs. Fun fact, the number one song during Casey's final show in the original American Top 40 era was Roll With It by Steve Winwood.
Oh, that's hilariously appropriate.
Yeah.
Nice. And as you stated, he went out professionally and with much class and grace.
Yeah.
We truly live in different times on that. That makes us long for the old days.
Yeah.
So many know most people anymore are rude, unprofessional, and about themselves when they're wronged or whatever.
Yeah.
Different times indeed.
Yeah. Because they want people to know. They want them to feel their pain. So they're like, you're going to know it. So deal with the aftermath. So Casey Kasem was replaced by Shadow Stevens, whose first American Top 40 show aired on August 13th of 1988 on 1,014 stations.
Mm.
To introduce Stevens to the audience, a 2-minute cold open was recorded to start the show, with Stevens making his way to the studio through the show's fictitious hall of history. Casey Kasem was mentioned during the course of the open as a giant marble statue of him helping guide Stevens to the studio. The change did not do much to stem the decline, as loyal listeners did not take to Stevens as they had to Casey Kasem.
Oh no.
Fun fact: when Shadow Stevens replaced Casey Kasem as host on August 13th of 1988, the first song he played was "Don't Worry, Be Happy" by Bobby McFerrin, which debuted at number 40.
Who is back there pulling the strings?
One would wonder.
Well, after Shadow Stevens, I believe there was Rick Dees, who donned the Countdown realm too after pioneer Casey Kasem. American Top 40 still goes on even now, but it is now hosted by this generation's Dick Clark, Casey Kasem, if you will, and that's Ryan Seacrest.
Mm.
Seacrest took over American Top 40 on January 10, 2004, following Casey Kasem's retirement from the series.
He's literally everywhere, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Seacrest.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact: Casey Kasem had been a radio disc jockey for 55 years, from age 22 to 77.
Wow.
That's a lot of time.
It's his whole life.
It was, and passing his hosting duties to Ryan Seacrest.
Yeah, he is everywhere. And although he does a decent job of taking on his task after the pop culture baton was passed on to him, he's just very today and it's different.
Yeah.
His fans are huge supporters of him, though. So there's that. But he does host the now version of American Top 40, and that's the acronyms AT40.
Yep. Acronyms are very today.
Yeah, they sure are. Oh, they sure are. So you can still catch AT40 weekly, counting down, the nation's best hits, as well as the classic throwbacks of Casey Kasem's American Top 40 on the weekends.
Well, one more thing I thought of concerning what could have been an occasional issue with any given song or hit that would hit the countdown was that one could contain racy, tongue in cheek titles, lyrics, or content.
Oh, okay.
And for what we've earlier described in Casey Kasem's demeanor and preference for upholding higher standards, at least according to him, he wanted to keep things above board. And that's much like, what we try to pattern off of,
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
because less is more. So you can probably guess that he was dutifully staunch about keeping things cleanish and family friendly.
Good.
Well, this worked for a while, but as questionable hits poured in, Casey Kasem had to gradually adjust his personal stance on things in order to keep the show going.
Oh, well, the show must go on, right?
Yeah, correct. So, fun fact: although Casey Kasem never banned a song from the countdown, there was at least one instance in which the title wasn't always said. Um, when George Michael's "I Want Your Sex" hit the Billboard charts in the summer of 1987, Casey Kasem and a sub host, Charlie Van Dyke, occasionally failed to announce the name of the song, only its artist. Example: George Michael's latest hit is up 5 notches this week.
You're like, I should have just done that. No, I'm kidding.
We'll do a censor beep.
That is hilarious. That's probably partly why our mama didn't fuss too much about us listening to American Top 40 each week.
Yeah.
But I digress. She wasn't keen on this band, this very song by George Michael or Samantha Fox, her racy tune.
Yeah.
Ugh, Mom loved being a buzzkill.
Mom was a live wire, but we love her for this, truly, right?
Yeah, okay.
So I have a couple more fun facts to share on Casey Kasem and his warm connection with diehard fans in regards to pop culture.
Okay.
Fun fact, did you know that in 1977, Kasem was hired as the narrator for the ABC sitcom Soap, but quit after the pilot episode because the show's controversial content?
Uh-oh.
Yes, this was definitely during his time while hosting American Top 40. And check this out. Fun fact. In 1984, Kasem made a cameo in Ghostbusters, reprising his role as the host of American Top 40.
Okay.
See how nostalgic.
Uh-huh.
You simply cannot go wrong when we deep dive into our throwback retro memories.
That is so cool, Coop. Well, we've definitely enjoyed so many things that Casey Kasem was involved in, not only with this weekly countdown, but it is especially nostalgic watching the old school cartoons. Especially like Scooby Doo, that series,
Yeah.
and hearing him voice Shaggy, for, at least for me.
Yeah.
It's so nostalgic. And actually, I mean, he spoke for other Shaggies. Like he was the main one with Scooby Doo. Where are you? But um, he actually did the one in the '80s, a pup named Scooby Doo.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and we talk about that in our episode. It's an Orchard Trek retro of a pup named Scooby Doo. So you'll have to check that out. We do give a shout out to Casey Kasem in that because he did speak for Shaggy. Well, we're about near the end of our Orchard Trek retro this week, but we promised to revisit a few more tidbits on Casey Kasem's personal life. Although stated earlier, he was a deeply private person. There were still some curious developments that hit the newsfeed back in the 2013-2014 era surrounding various family members.
Yeah, so various curious headlines indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the late aughts, Casey Kasem's health really started to deteriorate, which was, of course, concerning for those nearest and dearest to him. And in October of 2013, his daughter, Carrie Kasem, announced her father had Parkinson's disease, and that was diagnosed in 2007.
Oh no.
Yeah. However, a few months later, she said he had Lewy body dementia,
Mm.
which is hard to differentiate from Parkinson's.
Yeah, that's horrible disease.
Yeah. And his condition left him unable to speak during his final months. So, how tragic since we know and love him for his iconic voice.
Yeah, that is quite sad, isn't it?
Hmm.
And to add insult to injury, as Casey Kasem's health worsened in 2013, his second wife, Jean, prevented any contact with him, particularly by his children from his first marriage.
Hmm.
Now we can see it's starting to heat up a little bit.
Yeah.
So on October 1st, the children protested in front of the Kasem home. Some of Kasem's friends and colleagues and his brother, Warner, joined the protest. The older Kasem children sought conservatorship over their father's care. The court denied their petition in November. Hmm.
Hmm.
His widow, Jean Kasem, was known to adopt an eccentric fashion sense that earned her repeat mentions on various worst dressed lists.
Ooh.
Yeah, so she was already considered a bit of a curious type oddball, anyways.
Oops.
Yeah, by public opinion, and now this.
Hmm.
This is also an interesting fact. She was also 23 years Casey Kasem's junior.
Oh, it gets better.
Mm.
Gene removed Casey Kasem from his Santa Monica, California nursing home on May 7th of 2014, and on May 12th, Carrie Kasem was granted temporary conservatorship over her father, despite her stepmother's objection.
Mm-hmm.
The court ordered an investigation into Casey Kasem's whereabouts after his wife's attorney told the court that Casey was no longer in the United States.
Wait, what? What happened with that?
Yeah.
I mean, how weird is that?
Hmm.
I mean, that's a lot of who shot John for what situation sounding quite shyster.
Yes, yes, but he was soon found afterwards in Washington State. That's very much stateside. Okay, so on June 6th of 2014, Kasem was reported to be in critical but stable condition in a hospital in Washington state, receiving antibiotics for bed sores and treatment for high blood pressure.
Hmm.
And it was revealed he had been bedridden for some time. So a judge ordered separate visitation times for Kasem's wife and his children from his first marriage.
Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
That's a mysterious feud between his adult children versus their stepmother, Jean Kasem.
Terrible turn of events.
It is. And they went on to court accusing her of potential foul play where she, that being Jean, the stepmother, patrolled and restricted much needed access to their father as his health rapidly declined due to suffering from Lewy body dementia.
Hmm.
This is crazier than fiction, but this is what went down in real time in his final days.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure it no doubt broke his heart, at least of what he could understand of it. That and all this drama was sparking amongst his family members. I mean, he's sick. He doesn't
Yeah,
need all this extra garbage going on with, his family sparring against each other.
exactly.
Trust me, though, there are a few more bizarro twists and turns that went down. Yeah, all seemingly initiated by the second wife, Jean, versus his children. So, very unfortunate, but it is sad to report that on June 15th of 2014, Casey Kasem passed away. He was 82 years old. He will be forever missed in the hearts of fans around the world.
That is crazy, crazy sad.
It is.
And you feel so sorry for his children, though.
Mm-hmm.
And that was their loving father. And it'd be interesting if they were at all able to grieve properly with all the unnecessary drama surrounding both his debilitating illness and death.
Yeah.
And we, the fans, were touched by sadness too, for he was such an integral part of our fond nostalgia.
Yeah.
But all's not lost. Fun fact: did you know that in 1981, Casey Kasem was granted a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame?
Now we're talking.
Yeah, Casey Kasem received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, Rick D's rival. He also was inducted into the National Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame, Radio Division in 1985.
Okay.
So all during the time he would definitely be aware of what was going on. So that's
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
cool. And it makes total sense being that he was the very essence of a bona fide celebrity of yesteryear.
Yes. And real quick about the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
This is the type of name you want to see on that sidewalk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's again, there's something else we can talk about later, but I mean, like, it's just so watered down now.
Yeah.
Yeah, another day. Bring back yesteryear, please. We're crying caramel tears. It's really been quite the refreshing treat to deep dive into the life, career, and projects of one of the biggest iconic Hollywood personas and nostalgic radio voiceovers, Casey Kasem. From hearing him voice famous cartoon characters like Robin, Batman's compadre, as well as the more infamous Shaggy Doo. Zoinks! Yes, I did just call him Shaggy Doo. Zoinks! It's not a far stretch that from the moment you hear that familiar voice, that we instantly fall into blissful nostalgia.
And the successes of American Top 40 is almost single handedly due to Casey Kasem's dedication to the show's success and being the driving force behind its staying power all those years.
Word!
It's a testament to the unparalleled accomplishment by a true media legend in the rich realm of entertainment. And American Top 40 continues to be the most relevant source of pop music hits currently. And to this day, there's no better time to be had than when, thanks to technology, one can dive into and experience classic retro 70s and 80s hits along with Casey Kasem. While listening to classic American Top 40, yes, we were listening to Casey for sure.
All the same.
Yeah. So, talk about a warm trip of sheer nostalgia.
Yeah.
OMG. Oh my God. We hardcore music fans get to mentally and emotionally travel back to our recent past and enjoy our favorite tracks that never get old.
Yeah.
It just never gets old.
No.
So, and all brilliantly paired with one of the most iconic voices in pop culture as well as radio history. The original chart topper offerings that were archived for this blissful retro delight came from the 1970 1989 timeframe.
Oh my gosh, you said it. That is just oh yeah. There was nothing like American Top 40 at all.
Yeah.
So now comes the sign off. After the number one song was played, the bumper music began playing, and over that, Casey Kasem typically reported that week's chart date and read the end credits, then signed off with what became his and the show's unofficial motto: keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Beginning with the show of June 25th, 1977, he usually added, and keep your radio tuned right where it is, as a way to help its affiliated stations improve listener loyalty. So, the same to you Orchard Archivers, keep your radio tuned up right where it is on the Caramel Apples podcast.
Yeah, what Casey Kasem said. And Casey Kasem and his producers never lost sight of the stations carrying their show, and that the stories behind the songs were the chief reason the listeners tuned into American Top 40. I'm so happy to say that we were a part of the warm retro nostalgia. As a proper sign off, as Casey Kasem would say, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
My name's Casey Kasem. Join me again next week and we'll count down the 40 most popular hits in the USA. Till then, keep your feet in the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
Will do. And that's it for this week's episode. To make sure that you never miss out on another second of our Carmelicious podcast, meet up with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcast fix. Bye for now, and thanks so much for listening.